It's loading. Oh, I don't know what's happening. Oh, I don't know what's happening.
What's going on? Everything okay?
Oh, I don't know what's happening.
What's going on? Everything okay?
Okay, wait 1 second. Okay. Are we live? I think we're live. We had some technical difficulties. That was really creepy. So I was hearing my voice back. Did you hear that?
I heard mine and I heard yours. So I'm like, what is going on?
Okay. Sorry, guys. I don't know what you guys did or didn't see, but there was.
Happy Tuesday.
I know. I was going to say, it's almost like, some existential stuff popping up already.
Seriously, we created an exposure for you. Here you go.
But we can handle it, right? So.
Oh, yeah.
But welcome back, everyone. Aimee and I are back by popular demand. I know we've done a few webinars together, so I'm super excited to be here with her. I'll briefly introduce myself because I think a lot of you guys probably know me by now. I'm pretty frequent on the webinars as well as the Instagram account. My name is Madina, and I am a licensed therapist at OCD. I do see some members, but I also do a lot of the training and onboarding for the new therapists, which is also really exciting as well. We are growing and getting so big. So yeah, that's what I do. Aimee, do you want to introduce yourself?
So my name's Aimee. My Instagram handle is obsessively anxious. And really what I just want to do is bring some education on what OCD really is, since it's so stigmatized. So just trying to get the word out there and trying to just lend support whenever I can.
Yes, and you're great at it. So
thank you. So are you.
Thanks. And just a reminder, everyone, this is highly recommended to not be a substitute for therapy. We know that's, it's outside of some people's reach, whether it be financial or location. So we definitely want to answer the questions to our best of our ability, but we are limited a little bit. So if you are interested in signing up with an OCD, you can visit treatmyocd.com. You can also download our app. It's free in the App Store. And we have a lot of cool options on there, including some groups that you can attend for free. And you also don't have to be part of an OCD to attend those. So highly recommend those as well.
Also, if you go on my page, I love you guys so much. So I put the link on my page of just that way you can, if you're already follow me, you could just click the link on my page as well. Leads you right to it.
Yeah, I love that. Perfect. All right. Should we dive right in?
Let's go.
Okay. Okay. Suddenly, I'm obsessing about certain events that happened 2+ years ago, consent related, despite never being told I've caused an issue. How do I know if I can embrace uncertainty on this? So we don't necessarily need to know if you can embrace uncertainty. We know that all humans can live with uncertainty. In fact, we all do it every day. Such a good reminder I tell people is most of us probably got into some sort of transportation today. And there was an inherent risk in that. There was uncertainty that we may have gotten into a car accident or something of that nature. So I always like to point out the areas in which you are able to live with uncertainty, because OCD really likes to pick on the things, as we know, that the person values the most. So instead of doubting your ability to accept uncertainty, understand that there are certain areas where it feels a lot harder to accept uncertainty, but not necessarily impossible to do.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you want to add, Aimee?
Also, when you said that never, worried about it before, it doesn't really matter. Like OCD can pick on anything. Like I've had things come into my head that I've had there since I was like 10 years old. And then all of a sudden, one day it's there again. And really doesn't need any rhyme or reason to why it pops up. It's just there. And your job is to just let it be there without judging it and giving yourself compassion, because you can't control whether it pops in your head or not.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the consensus probably, I'm guessing, for a lot of the questions you guys all ask tonight is we can't control our thoughts, right? Our thoughts come in with, like Aimee was saying, no real rhyme or reason. And, trying to rehash the details of something that happened years and years ago is kind of a lost cause, right? Because what we know about anxiety is that it's never satisfied. So no matter how much you ruminate on that event, you're not going to come to a conclusion that anxiety feels good about. It's always going to question or doubt it. So really, really working on resisting those rituals that are centered around that certain event that you're speaking about.
Right, because OCD is always going to want another answer. Like, it's never going to be enough for it. It always needs more fuel. So.
Absolutely. Okay. I am easily angry, upset. I feel guilty. I feel so guilty though. Why did I become like this? So if you're talking about in regards to your symptoms, I would say, I would try to normalize as best as I can that it makes sense why you would feel angry and upset, because like I was just mentioning, anxiety attacks the things that are most important to us. So it feels like an attack on our values or who we think we are as individuals. So normalizing those emotions. And I know I talk so much about what we refer to as the inhibitory learning model. And I think anyone who's on this call or this live, even writing this down, because I think it's important that we create different relationships with our thoughts, but also our feelings, right? A lot of people with anxiety are fighting up against feelings that are warranted to have as just a human in general. So instead of trying to figure out why you feel so guilty or why you feel so angry or why did I become like this, recognize that, I'm clearly going through a time of suffering, and what can I do that aligns with my values that could help the situation, versus trying to get rid of or understand the emotion, or to judge yourself for having the emotion too. That's what it kind of sounds like you're doing.
Like you're checking your feelings a little bit, because you're noticing that you're so easily angry, you're so easily upset. But like Madina said, being angry is a human emotion. Being sad is a human emotion. It's when it's taking over our daily life that it becomes an issue. So if you're angry one day, don't beat yourself up for it. Like, I get angry, I get upset, I cry. I said on my page the other day, I don't suffer from depression, but I did feel depressed. And I allowed myself to feel that way. But I'm not going to check and see, well, does this mean that I'm having depression? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I'm allowed to feel the way that I feel right now.
Yeah, like you felt like in that moment it would have been easy to spiral down, like trying to figure out if you were now clinically depressed because you were having a down day.
Because that was one of my biggest fears, is because I had the suicidal OCD. So becoming depressed was a huge fear of mine. So I had a choice. I could either let the thought be there and let the feeling be there and not try to figure out what it means, or I could let myself feel all the feelings, and within an hour it had already passed.
Yeah, and that's the key too, is you resisted assigning meaning to the depression.
Correct.
Or judging the depression or the sadness, right?
Right.
So yeah, that's amazing. So hopefully that can be helpful, Anna, allowing your feelings to be there, even though they might not be the most comfortable, and recognizing that you can handle those feelings. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Can relationship OCD give you a huge hate towards your partner for nothing? I have so many thoughts for my partner. They aren't really about love, but it's about hate, and they trigger huge anxiety and guilt. Can I put you on the spot, Aimee? I think you talked about some relationship stuff.
Of course. So I actually just had this issue with my husband like last week. Not going to give you reassurance, but I was getting pissed off at him about everything. Like there was nothing he could do that wasn't making me upset.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just relationships. Like you don't have to be perfect all the time. He doesn't have to be perfect all the time, and neither do you. So your expectation of it trying to be perfect is what's continuing this cycle to keep going. Let yourself have problems. Like everybody's going to get into fights, and everybody's going to feel some kind of way, but you're judging yourself for it. Like you could say, yeah, I'm a horrible girlfriend, I'm a horrible fiance, I'm a horrible wife because I'm having these feelings. You can have feelings towards him just like you can have feelings towards anyone else. And he probably has the same thoughts about you. He just doesn't pay any attention to them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of relationship OCD work I do with individuals is more so centered around, like developing what relationships look like, intimate, friendship, family relationships. They don't look a particular way. Like even with with relationship OCD, I think it kind of meshes a lot with just right themes, right? I need to feel just right, or the interaction between us needs to be just right or perfect. And if it kind of goes outside of what anxiety thinks it should look like, which it always does, that's where the guilt and the anxiety comes from. I mean, I definitely also don't want to give you any reassurance, that none of us on Treat My OCD lives ever do that. But when you tell me that you're feeling a lot of anxiety and guilt, it does remind me of judgment around the thought and not wanting the thought or the feeling of hatred or annoyance or frustration towards your partner versus normalizing that as part of what it means to be in a relationship. I don't know if this is what I commonly will see, as there's some sort of irritation in the relationship. And then there's this maybe overvigilance or overanalyzing of what that means. And then it does start to become maybe more of an intense emotion or thought around it because we've given that thought or feeling more weight, right? We've invested more behaviors into that thought, and we know that behaviors fuel our fears. So I would definitely take a look at any behaviors that are feeding into your fear of being frustrated with your partner. Okay. Also, this is just a side note, Aimee, Alex says that she can hear us fine now.
That was so weird. I do not know what happened. That was so odd.
But I'm glad they found it funny. So I've had different themes for the past month. It takes a few days to stop caring after a thought, but I've been doing it well. Is there any advice I should know? Thanks. I guess my big thing here is I don't think the goal is necessarily to stop caring. And that might not have been your intention in writing this. And I'm always just very skeptical of OCD. I think that's a very unrealistic goal because there are going to be things that we care about as individuals. But as long as we're not letting that influence, again, our behaviors, I think that's really where you're going to see the most progress. Because you can care about something, but just because you care about something doesn't mean that you have to go, for example, above and beyond to make sure that thing that you care about doesn't have the fear come true with it, if that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense. Versus trying not to have any emotion towards a thought or a situation or a feeling. You're allowed to have that emotion, but you're allowed to have it. I'm talking in circles a little bit at this point. So if you want to add anything, Aimee.
I don't know how to put it, but be careful too that you're not forcing a thought in to see if you still care, because then that becomes compulsive. So like Madina said, not caring is not the goal here. It's just allowing the thought to be present. But like I said, make sure that you're not forcing it in and then checking it because you're performing a compulsion when you're doing that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know you mentioned it earlier too with checking feelings, because you want to remember that checking is not reserved for like checking the door or the
Mhm.
stove, which it can certainly look like that. But yeah, I think a lot of times with most themes, there's some sort of internal checking going on.
Like you said, with the just right theme, it goes very closely together. Like I have to feel this way or I have to know why.
Yeah, that's so true. Because I've seen that too, what you were talking about, Aimee, as far as like purposely conjuring up a thought to see how you feel about it and then
Mhm.
assigning meaning to that feeling. So I've seen it work.
And then you feel guilty for bringing the thought on yourself because you're like, okay,
Yeah.
well, I brought it on myself. So now do I want the thought? It's such a bad spiral.
Yeah, and I say this all the time, but it's so worth saying again, is anxiety. That's a good depiction of how anxiety is never satisfied.
Mhm.
I had a woman I was working with. She had harm OCD, and she was really anxious around, anything that had to do with harm. I think we were doing a lot of like watching First 48, which is like a crime show.
Oh, yeah.
It would bring her a lot of anxiety. And then, once we did a ton of exposure around it, she started to feel less and less anxious. And then she started to worry, well, Madina, because I don't feel anxious about this, does that mean I now want to kill someone? Shouldn't that thought make me feel anxious? So she was assigning meaning to her
Mhm.
thought, her emotion, and checking, right? Um,
Absolutely.
so yeah, it can OCD. That's why I always say I'm very skeptical of OCD because I think it has a lot of tricks up its sleeve. And I'd
Never,
rather
ever
be,
satisfied.
what's that?
Never satisfied.
Right. I'd rather overshoot than undershoot for sure with OCD. Um, and then the other thing too, I mean, it sounds like your theme is switching a little bit, which I know can be frustrating, but also definitely want to normalize that for you. I think that's really common. Um, for OCD to jump from theme to theme because it's really just testing the waters, especially if you're doing your ERP accurately. Yeah, I feel hesitant already to say doing your ERP accurately, but if you're doing your ERP, it's not uncommon, specifically in that situation, for the theme to jump because you've kind of like resolved the fear in that, right? If your behavior or the ERP that you didn't match up with the fear that OCD was presenting, it had to move on to something else because
Of course.
your behavior wasn't aligning with the fear. So it might be a good sign too.
I like to say on my page, it misses you, so it wants to come back. So it just brings something else.
I love that. You bring a little humor to it. Okay. How to deal with depression and OCD simultaneously. All right.
Navita, Madina, I'm gonna let you handle that one. Navita, that's the lady I work with. I'm tired.
It's okay. Yeah, so I see feeling depressed down low. Very common with OCD because think about it, it can be depressing to be ruminating on thoughts all day, maybe giving into some behaviors that don't feel very good. But you feel compelled to do, right? It's kind of like this catch-22. So it's very common to see people feeling down about that situation. So a lot of times what happens is if I feel like the depression is a result of having OCD, I'll let the member know, like, hey, let's treat the OCD. My assumption is that the depression is also going to reduce because your quality of life is going to improve, right? We know a lot of people with OCD, they stop doing things that they really love doing because that time might be consumed with rituals, or maybe a fear or an anxiety is telling them not to do that thing that they really love. So then their quality of life really tends to suffer. So that's one way to look at it. The other thing that I often see with depression and OCD is kind of this fear, and Aimee, you were touching on this earlier too, is this fear of like, what if I'm depressed? Does that mean that I could kill myself?
Yep.
So that fear around, being depressed the rest of your life or committing suicide is definitely present.
And I actually, I know I speak about this a lot on my page, but it's like the fear of other mental illnesses is a very real theme in OCD, like, schizophrenia, OCD, fear of psychosis, fear of bipolar, fear of autism, even. Like, there's so many realms which it could dive into. So, you know, like Madina said, like, dealing with the OCD first can relieve the depression, but then it's more of, are you fearful of becoming depressed? Because I know I've said this before, is things can always be treated, you know, and as scary as it may seem in the moment. Like I had a girl on my page earlier today tell me that she's at the point now where if she's got schizophrenia, it wouldn't bother her anymore because they're strong enough to deal with it, and so is she. And I was like, oh my God, like I love that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was basically telling you like, hey, that could happen, but I know I'll manage it, but
Mhm.
I'm not going to worry about it right now.
Exactly.
Because it's not relevant, right? So many of the things that we worry about, all of us, right? It's like, it's really not relevant to what's currently going on. I mean, I know that anxiety and OCD is such a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like we could even sit here and think about depression and OCD. So, you know, if you fear that you're going to be depressed for the rest of your life and then you ruminate on that, and then because you're ruminating all day, you're just laying in bed, you've kind of, the situation has kind of manifested itself versus, yeah, I may wind up being depressed my entire life, but I'm going to get out and live my life anyway, right? That's ERP.
Absolutely.
So living your life. And I think that that's important to uncover is kind of that core fear is what I refer to it as. So, people will come in with, these surface level fears, right? I could get someone sick, for example. But really, if you uncover it, like what would that mean about you as an individual if you did get someone else sick? Well, that might mean I'm a bad person. Okay, well, if you were a bad person, what would that mean? Well, then no one would want to be my friend and I would be all alone. So is it that you're scared that you're going to get someone sick, or is it that you're really scared you're going to be alone for the rest of your life? And so then we can do exposures around that as well. So I think the core fear is really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. This is not a question, but we want to say hi back. Hello. Thanks for joining us.
Hi.
Got an IG follower.
Oh, thank you for the follow, honey.
Okay. I feel much more irritable. Is that a symptom of depression? It can be. I also noticed, so irritability is actually a symptom for anxiety as well. Regardless, it sounds like you're not feeling the best. And I think that that's the important piece, not necessarily, what it could be attributed to. I definitely understand why you want to know. But what can you do that would combat that irritability? Have you gotten away from, some of the things that you really enjoy doing? Is the irritability a reflection of something you're feeling anxious about, right? People who are anxious, they feel irritable because there's just this constant like loop going on in their head, and they might be doing all these rituals all day. So it makes sense why they would be on edge. So if it's from more of like an anxiety stance, that could definitely be what's fueling the irritability. Do you mind if I ask, Aimee, what do you do when you're feeling irritable, or do you notice anything?
I go outside. I notice that the sun is like literally the best thing for me. Once I get outside and breathe in the air, like I know that sounds so cliche, but just going outside, reading a book, even carrying a stress ball with you. Like those are my three go-tos. Like I'm outside with my kids and I'm in my happy place, so.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually a very valid and useful example, because think of it, to ERP, in my opinion, the biggest ERP that anyone can ever do is that they get out and they live their life, even though they have doubts and fears and uncertainty, right? It's not necessarily about like sitting there and doing that formal ERP, in my opinion. It's about living your life. And so, yeah, that might look like, hey, I'm feeling really irritable, and irritability might want me to stay inside and just like maybe ruminate or lash out on someone. And instead of doing that, I'm going to actually get out and live my life, right?
Well, in regards to that too, if I can share something.
Yeah.
The job that I'm at now, I used to have like really bad intrusive thoughts surrounding a lot of people that I worked with. And I could have very easily quit my job and just gotten away from all of it. But then I could have done that, but OCD would have attacked. I'm sorry, I can't talk. OCD would have attacked the next job that I went to. and then the next one and the next one. So my ERP was was to keep the job. And now I get those thoughts still about the same people, but it doesn't bother me anymore. So I chose to live my life according to my values and according to what I love to do instead of what OCD decided to want me to do.
Yeah, I love that. That's so brave of you to do.
Thank you.
And I'm sure a lot of people can probably resonate on the call with that. It definitely makes sense from like my therapist's mind right now. It's that subconscious level, right? That's where OCD resides. Fear resides in subconscious brain. Subconscious brain does not understand language. It only understands action and behavior.
Right.
So you didn't try to talk yourself out of, oh, I know that I won't harm these people and leave the job, because that behavior would have fed into the fear. But you chose to stay there, which is the exact opposite of what the fear says, right? That subconscious level. And the subconscious level only understands emotion and imagery, right? And that is what the subconscious brain is noticing, that action piece, because it's that imagery of like physically staying at the job. So I think that's really an amazing.
So staying there was ultimately the best thing for me, because I think that if I had left, like I said earlier, it would have kept the cycle running and it would have just continued.
Yeah. And the other cool thing, which we were talking about earlier, that you said you did, is you realized that OCD wouldn't have been satisfied. You would have just it would have said the same thing for the next job.
Just would have picked a different target.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a little bit of a side note, but I noticed this a lot with COVID testing. So people with contamination, OCD might be excessive with getting some of the COVID tests. And they quickly find that very soon after they get their COVID test, they're like, what if it was a false positive or false negative? Or what if I didn't take it right? Or what if I contracted it on the way out? Or while I was at the clinic? Like I've seen that. And again, it's a good depiction of how anxiety is never satisfied. So no matter what you do, I've never met anyone that says, you know what, Madina, anxiety said I can stop doing my compulsions because it's not satisfied, right?
Yeah, I've never heard that.
So I think that's, some sound advice from Aimee. We have another fan, Aimee. Love your Insta. She does have a pretty cool Insta.
Thank you. I love you guys.
Okay. How do you deal with the grief that comes with OCD that makes you feel like you lost yourself and constantly don't feel normal and you wish you can be the person you used to be?
So it's okay to grieve that, because you do lose a lot struggling with this disorder. Like I've lost precious moments with my family, with my friends because of rituals. I've lost friends because I never wanted to go out because I was too scared. I was a danger. It's just like you're allowed to feel grief with this disorder, just like you're allowed to feel grief when you lose someone, because you do feel like you lost a piece of yourself. So it's just like dealing with any other grief. You allow yourself to feel it, just like with everything else with OCD. And, you get the help that you need if you need it. Like I went to grief counseling when my mom died, and I feel like the tools that I learned from that helps me deal with the grief from living with OCD, if that makes sense. And, I don't wish to be the person that I was before OCD happened, because I feel like OCD made me a lot stronger. So yes, it's a wicked disorder, but I wouldn't change anything, because if I didn't have it, then I wouldn't have my page. I have people messaging me every single day telling me that my page saved their life. So why would I want to go back to what I used to be? You know what I'm saying? So if you look at it in a positive perspective and what you can gain from the experience, it'll put it a different way for you.
Yeah, I love that. Such a big part of ERP is acceptance, right? And what you're saying is we need to, although hard, accept that, yeah, this is the reality of the situation. I have OCD, and as much as I wish I could be before I developed the symptoms, that just might not be necessarily a realistic outcome, and kind of hanging on to that might cause us more pain. It doesn't mean, So I think of acceptance when I talk to people about that. I really am curious about what acceptance means to them. And what I find a lot of people saying is acceptance means that I think it's okay. And if you look at the true definition of acceptance, it does not mean that you think it's okay. And so if you can even detach from what your definition of acceptance is, because you can prefer that this wasn't your life. It makes a ton of sense. I think that ever since treating OCD, I think of one of my members at any given moment of the day, because whatever I'm doing would be 20 times harder for one of my members. And I can feel that, right? And that's difficult. So, definitely trying your best to accept that this is the reality, even though it's not what you prefer. And
I don't like the whole term, like, I could have it a lot worse, because that kind of deflates your suffering, so I don't ever like when people say that, because it's like, yeah, I could have it worse, but why does that, like, it makes it feel like your struggle isn't enough. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but.
No, it makes total sense. Like what I say in response, because I definitely hear people say that, is your pain. Now I'm blanking on it. Your pain is your pain, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's work, because we could qualify it in the other direction, right? Well, you could also have it better, right? So yeah, I'm not a fan of that statement either. And I also wanted to piggyback off what you were saying as far as like feeling like OCD made you stronger. I think something that I continually learn even to this day when I see members is that it's amazing how much you guys care. I think we could probably go a better way about caring, but you guys care a lot. And that's actually a really good trait to have, right? I think of even
the empathy that we have is amazing.
Yeah. And this is a side note, but not really. People with OCD, they found are very creative, which makes a lot of sense because it takes a lot of creativity to ruminate, for example. And if you think about that, you want creativity. Like think of when you were a child, you would do a lot of like imagination stuff, and that was healthy. And so having that is not necessarily a bad thing. But again, I think there's a lot of judgment that goes around these thoughts and these feelings for individuals with OCD. And that's what's causing it to be more of an issue.
Absolutely.
The brain being creative is actually really amazing.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. So we don't have to be scared of our thoughts and our feelings. So,
such great questions tonight.
I know. I love it. How to deal with not thinking about your OCD thoughts constantly, like it's repetitive, and then the thoughts continue. Well, the thoughts are probably continuing because you're trying not to think about them. So I would, in similar vein to probably anyone who has any sort of theme on this live, is to let the thoughts be there, but to resist assigning meaning to them, resist trying to get them to go away. And just let them be there and let them pass in their own time.
And I think a lot of times, like on the Treat My OCD website, thought stopping does not work. And I think that that's what you're trying to do here. Like Madina said earlier with acceptance, and I know I speak a lot about this on my page as well, is that when you're trying to constantly push it away, it's because you're trying not to think of it because you're assigning meaning to it, that it's a good thought or it's a bad thought. But there's no such thing as a good or bad thought. And as acceptance, you're accepting the fact that you have a mind and that you're able to think and it's able to be creative, like Madina was saying. But if you think of it like that, like sorry, I'm rambling. Like if you think of it like it's a hamster wheel, basically, like your mind is constantly spinning all of the time. If you're trying to thought stop, it's just not going to work. Like, I don't know. I'm rambling tonight. I can't think straight.
You're not rambling. I'm understanding everything, right? Yeah, I agree. Unfortunately, a lot of traditional therapy goes against what would be helpful for OCD. And I think that's why I love this platform so much, is because we're using evidence-based approaches, which might sound kind of like far-fetched or off the beaten path, but they work. People with OCD are getting better because of this treatment. So it is definitely helpful to do your research if you aren't already seeing an ERP therapist to, do the proper research so there aren't, techniques that you're using that might be worsening the symptoms. So yeah, OCD remains very misunderstood by the community. I swear, like, anytime I like don't even want to tell people I treat OCD, because anytime I tell someone, they're like, oh, I have OCD, and I'm like, oh Lord, like.
I saw the whole thing yesterday about obsessive Christmas disorder, and I'm like, I can't believe we're starting this again. Like, I really thought that people would just get it.
Oh, like, is it like a
like obsessive cat disorder, obsessive Christmas disorder, obsessive clean. They like a company even made their name obsessive obsessive cleaning disorder company.
Yeah,
like,
so really minimizing the disorder.
I'm like, please don't do that. You have no idea.
Yeah. Okay. Trying to answer some people we didn't get to yet. Can you have, I'm guessing, more than one type of OCD at once?
Multiple themes, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I had
Take
8
it away, Aimee.
at one time. One time I had 8 at once.
Wow.
I felt like I was living in a hell that I created inside. I didn't create it, but like OCD created inside my own head. So yes, you can have more than one. I had religious and harm at once. I had religious harm, schizophrenia, POCD, contamination, just right, symmetry, and ROCD at once.
Whew. That sounds tiring.
Is that just 8? Sounds more than that. But yeah, so yeah, you can definitely have more than once. I know it's hard to do ERP for when you have multiple OCD themes at once, but you can do it. Just might take a little bit more time because I try to do at least an hour of ERP a day. So you have multiple themes. I don't know about that, Madina. Like, would you do like ERP on the same day for each theme?
It depends. I mean, usually I'll start with the theme that feels most prominent or life interfering for the individual. Or I might also go on the flip side and start with something that's not as scary. I kind of just communicate with the member about that. But yeah, I can definitely validate that that's probably really frustrating and confusing. Maybe feeling even a little bit attacked, but know that you can also attack back to OCD. I talk a lot about personifying OCD, right? So, and that's where that values and fears list that I talk about so frequently comes in, right? The values list is you, the fear list is OCD. And that way you can separate a little bit with what it looks like to live life out of fear or out of what OCD wants you to do, or if you want to live your life. And that's the values side. So yeah, give yourself some grace as you go through the process, because progress is not linear. As I was just we were talking about that before. I just posted on my Instagram page about that because I think this is things. It's a side note, but I think I see it very frequently is, I even had someone earlier, I think I was telling you about this a little bit too before we got live, was he moved and he thought it was going to be, of course, way worse than it wound up being. And he was kind of shocked that he felt not anxious, which is interesting because that's the whole reason you guys come to see us, right? The goal is to feel like you can manage your anxiety a bit better. So it's just so OCD-like to then doubt why you're managing better.
It's like, is there something wrong? Did I ever have OCD?
I've heard people tell me that maybe I'm faking feeling better. And I'm like, oh, Lord.
The things this disorder can come up with is wild.
Yeah. And I think even just like humor, obviously when I have good rapport with a member, we definitely implement a little bit of humor because some of the stuff that, anxiety presents to us is just wild.
Like I'll sit there. I had a thought yesterday and I sat there and I'm like, really? Like I did like a stupid face. I'm like, really? Like this is the best you got? Like, like bring it on kind of thing. It's like, God, it was so stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'll tell you, ever since I started treating OCD, I have tons of intrusive thoughts, and it's funny in a way. That's all I can do is I can laugh at them. Because I hear them, right? And I want to share that with you guys because the reason I'm having more intrusive thoughts is the only reason is because I'm hearing them more. Not because they're more important to worry about, not because I need to figure them out, not because they mean something about me, like my character or anything like that. Just because you're having a thought, there doesn't have to be meaning. I know I've said it a million times today, but I think it's important.
I think that's, if I can say one more thing, I think it's so important that you brought that up too, because it's like, I know if I see something triggering on the news, I have intrusive thoughts about that, like constantly. The news, if I'm reading a new book, watching a new movie, like I can have intrusive thoughts about it. Like it's just, like you said, I don't have to assign meaning to it. It's just you hear intrusive thoughts from your members, and I'm seeing it in the news or on social media. Like, because I don't put trigger warnings on stuff, and neither do a lot of therapists. So if I see something triggering, I'm going to have intrusive thoughts about it.
Yeah. And again, that's just what the brain does. So like, if you see a commercial about a heart attack, it makes sense why you then think of like, maybe I could have one, or maybe a loved one could have one. Not because it's actually more likely to happen or more important to worry about. It's just, you saw something, so it makes sense, right? It's even think of advertisement, right? You see a Reese's commercial. Oh, now I really want Reese's. So again, it just makes a lot of sense. So I think even just, I talk a lot about normalizing why things pop into our heads. And I think that that's important on stepping away from the judgment that is so common with people with OCD. So. All right, so let's keep chugging along. Okay. Things I used to do to satisfy my checking behaviors now seem like they're not enough, and I have to do more to receive the same satisfaction. Why is this? Yeah, so this, I'm going to get like maybe a little heady right now, but I want you to think of a CBT model. So anyone who doesn't know what CBT is, it's cognitive behavioral therapy. ERP is actually a form of CBT. It's different than CBT. But basically what CBT says is that our thoughts and our feelings and our behaviors all influence each other. So someone with OCD will have an intrusive thought. They will feel maybe like anxious, shame, disgust, what have you, and then they'll do their compulsion. And so what happens when they do their compulsion is OCD chimes in and says, hey, that worked. Make sure you do it next time. So they get that temporary relief, but then they get triggered again. They have that intrusive thought. They feel anxious or distressed. And then OCD says, do that thing you did last time, because remember it worked. And so you do the behavior. And so there's like this tolerance that builds up, because the more you do it, the stronger the fear becomes, because the behavior aligns with the fear. So again, you could talk yourself out of it till you're blue in the face. But if your behavior is not matching up with the logic, you are going to find that you're going to need more and more compulsions to be satisfied with the result.
This was actually one of my first compulsions with OCD, was checking. And when I'm having a really bad day, and I'm going to admit that sometimes I still do this, I check my children's breathing. I will check them 5 times, because when I'm having a bad day, I can't land on the number 6, because religious scrupulosity, hello. I will lay down in bed, and OCD will say to me, you need to go back in there and check them, because what if they die? Like, I choose to stay here and lay down because I checked them already, and I don't need to do it again. It's gotten to that point now where I still have to check them to make sure that they're still breathing okay, because they're my children and I'm their mother, but I don't need to go back in there and check them. And now I land on the number 6, because they're still going to be fine.
Yeah. And the big thing here is whether you check them once, 5, 10 times, if you could
It's
truly
never going to be satisfied.
never going to be satisfied, but you truly could never control that, right? All of us on this call, I keep calling it a call. I think it's because I'm used to work. All of us on this live, we're trying to control something that we don't technically have control over. If we could control whether someone dies or not, for example, or if someone breaks into my home, or if I leave my stove on and the house burns down, we can't control that to a certain degree, right? So much of ERP goes back to trusting, right? If it's a fear that you're going to leave your stove on and your house is going to burn down, trust that you turned it off, right? Because I'm willing to bet any person that's house has caught on fire because of a stove, for example, didn't anticipate that to happen, right? And so if they could have controlled that, they would have. The goal of living is not to be mistake-free. And I think that's what a lot of people with anxiety are going for. And so, recognizing if you could control that future outcome, you would have done it already. We would all be in a very different life situation. And I think it's a great testament to how resilient we are as humans. Research shows time and time again that we are resilient. We are way more resilient than
we give ourselves credit for.
Yeah. And, think of any time you've been through something that was really difficult. It probably was not the best experience. You probably preferred it didn't happen, but you got through it. You managed it. You handled it. You figured it out. And so you can do the same without that checking behavior. I kind of frame it this way is no matter whether you do all the compulsions in the world or you don't, you're left with the same result, uncertainty and sometimes uncomfortable things. So I'd rather us not so much worry about gaining more certainty, but work on not doing all the rituals that are stealing your life away from you, interrupting your ability to be present.
That's such a great point.
Thanks. All right. This will be a good one for you to comment on, Aimee. I have an intense fear of psychosis or schizophrenia, and it's mainly because I interpret the physical effects of anxiety as psychotic in nature. I have depersonalization and derealization, and those symptoms add to the fear. Any tips?
My heart goes out to you because, man, that theme is, I'm not saying every theme is horrible in OCD, but man, this one makes it feel like you're literally going to lose it. I know I've said on the calls before that I got to the point where I didn't want to leave my house because I was afraid I was going to hallucinate. Like it got to the point it was that bad. I wouldn't stare at a certain spot for too long because I was afraid that I was going to start hallucinating. What? Like that doesn't happen, but I understand what you're saying. So it can feel as real as it can get. And with depersonalization and derealization mixed in, it makes you feel like the world is unreal. Like you're looking down at yourself. So the thing is like with psychosis and schizophrenia, I don't want to say this as reassurance, but if you were in a stage of psychosis or schizophrenia, you wouldn't be worrying about it. Like I have people that I've talked to, and a lot of times their families are the ones that notice that there was something wrong, not themselves. So basically sitting with it and saying to yourself that if you do develop psychosis and you do develop schizophrenia, then you're going to be okay. And there's treatment for it. And if I could actually shout out a page that really helped me, if that's okay, if I can do that on here. Schizophrenic NYC on Instagram. She's actually lives in New York, and she's living with schizophrenia, and she tries to normalize it just like I do with OCD. And it's really just the fear of not knowing what the disorder can bring. But then again, we don't know that either with OCD, because there's always something new every day with it, just like with schizophrenia. So with them, their delusions and voices are managed. And with us, by accepting our thoughts and feelings, they're managed as well. So really, what's the difference?
Yeah, I mean, we all have situations where we have to manage. And yeah, I think that's a great point. Like you're learning to manage having OCD, which is also a feat in itself. I mean, it's an extra roadblock. But it's also something that it sounds like you're doing currently. And then, yeah, I think a lot of interoceptive exposures, AKA exposures of re-evoking some of those physical sensations that you don't particularly like. So actually, Aimee, a common one I do with schizophrenia fears is staring at a spot on the wall.
I have done that now. Yeah. Because it's just like, okay, well, if it happens, then it's going to happen. And me not staring at it isn't going to not make it happen.
And again, if we could control whether we develop schizophrenia or not, I'm willing to bet no one would have it, right? Because I don't think actually wants that. So, again, just because you're fearing something, again, for any theme, for anyone listening right now, because you fear something doesn't mean it's actually more important to worry about. It's a values assessment. You ask anyone walking around what they're scared of, their values right there, right? If I'm scared that my family is going to die, I'm willing to bet that individual's value, one of the top ones, is family. Okay, cool. Now that I know it's really just me being aware of the things that I'm scared of versus these are things that I need to figure out or prevent. I think that can help you navigate that a little bit better. But yeah, you don't have to be scared of your physical sensations. For me,
what helped with that theme too was watching documentaries about schizophrenia. Like that really helped.
That's a good idea.
I know the page that I just shouted out was she has a lot of people on her page that have real life stories that she presents, and it's very eye-opening. And there's a huge stigma with that disorder as well. So learning about it really helped me see that, yeah, it can be scary to a certain standpoint, but that was because I didn't know anything about it. I just automatically jumped to worst case scenario, and it's not like that.
Yeah, like predicting things are going to be way worse, shocker, than they actually are. Yeah,
right. And I had to be careful too, though, because it's like I started watching them, but then it became compulsive because I'm like, okay, if I watch this, and that means that my anxiety is going to go away. No, that's not how I'm supposed to do it.
Well, that's amazing that you caught that, because I think that's a little bit more of an intricacy and a little bit more tricky to catch. But yeah, if we were doing ERP, and that's why I always say the best ERP is to live life, even though you have fear. So yeah, that might not look like the formal ERP practice of like purposely provoking yourself and maybe sitting with a script or a response prevention message, because it can become compulsive. Because does anxiety oftentimes go down with ERP? Yes, absolutely. But that is not the goal, because we can't get rid of anxiety altogether. We can only learn to create a different relationship to it. So instead of why is this here? What does this mean? It's more of, oh, there's that emotion again, and I know how to handle it. And I know I can handle it.
I did it before, and I'll do it again.
Yeah, I love that. I did it before, and I'll do it again. But yeah, the documentaries on schizophrenia, One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is a great exposure. The Truman Show is a good one for more like existential. Life is a Simulation. If you put it in the YouTube search bar, that's another great one.
I have to watch that one. I haven't seen that yet.
Maybe he's got some ERPs lined up for after But yeah, watching some of those things can definitely address some of those fears. Alrighty, on to the next one. Okay. How to recognize mental compulsions for sexual orientation, OCD, that aren't your typical testing. Also, how do you stop these mental compulsions? So a common one I see is checking again. So checking how I feel about my partner, how I feel about maybe the sex that I'm not sure if I'm attracted to them, right? So if I walk by an attractive woman, do I feel like I think she's attractive? And if I do, what does that mean? Or checking my groinal sensations, right? Am I getting any sensations down there that might mean something? That can be really common. Why don't I feel excited to see my partner? What does that mean? Or, oh my God, I feel too excited to see them. What does that mean? So I think there's a lot of different things that I see, but checking is definitely a big one. And I wouldn't necessarily, so this one is tricky in the sense of, I don't want you to not have thoughts around your partner. So for example, you can notice that you don't feel particularly excited on a given day to see your partner. But the key here is that you're resisting assigning meaning to it. So it doesn't have to mean anything in either direction. Because we could say, I'm sure you felt excited to see someone before and you're no longer friends or with them, or they're no longer in your life or anything like that. So feeling excited doesn't have to mean anything, and neither does not feeling excited. So resisting assigning meaning again.
Right.
I'm trying to think of other things that I notice. Attractiveness is a big one, like checking attractiveness.
Like you said, it all comes down back to that just right feeling.
Yeah. Because think of it too, when you're in a relationship, and I don't care what anyone on this call says, you find other people attractive of the same sex, of the opposite sex, sex that you think you're not attracted to. That is just, you see someone who's attractive. That doesn't have to, again, mean anything per se, other than that person is pleasant to look at. So yeah, resisting assigning meaning. Oh, I love this question. I'm going to hop on this one. The procrastination thing. What kind of OCD is that? Is this that envelope comes in the mail with insurance paperwork to fill out, and you stare at it? Yeah, just right. OCD. Yeah, that's kind of like the perfectionistic styled type of thinking. So you see a lot of procrastination with this subtype because they basically get very overwhelmed, because who wouldn't be if everything had to be perfect? So the daunting task of filling out all the insurance paperwork perfectly sounds overwhelming, right? So let me not even start. The other thing that I'll notice is I need to find the perfect time to do it. So I know that this is going to take like 3 hours to do. Right. And, obviously it's hard to find a 3-hour chunk in your day that's open. So I can't start it yet. So I have to wait until I have those perfect 3 hours. Or maybe something in my environment's not perfect. Like maybe the kids are being too loud, or maybe I have a headache, or I didn't eat enough food today, or whatever. So I would encourage you to, whichever one of those resonates with you the most, to just start it. Okay. Whether it's maybe not the right time, or you don't have enough time that you think you should have, just start it. A lot of perfectionistic or just right is a lot of like thinking preemptively before doing the task. And then that stalls actually starting the task. Mm-hmm. And again, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? You want to do it perfect, so you don't wind up doing it at all because that's too overwhelming. And then I'll tell you this insider tip, not doing it at all is definitely not the right way to do it, right?
I was just going to say that.
So, yeah, I always say just do it. So yeah, I'll be transparent on here for a moment. I have the tendency to maybe overthink a little bit on like when I work, I really like to work out. So I'll overthink like, should I do yoga today, or do I want to go to the gym, or do I want to do like this interval class, or maybe I just want to take a rest day? And I caught myself doing it this morning, and I progressed. Yes, I was just ruminating on it. And what happened was I was literally almost late to the yoga class that I signed up for because I spent so much time trying to figure out which option to choose. And, obviously in all seriousness, I'm not saying, this is the same magnitude of OCD, but I want, to normalize a little bit that this happens, right? We as humans, we think weird things or odd things, and we want to avoid feeling a certain way. Because that's a lot of what just right OCD is we don't want to feel a certain way. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily so much of like this feared consequence. It's more so like, I don't feel quite right, or this doesn't feel quite
like I just don't like it.
Yeah.
Like so, but discomfort.
Yeah. And but that's the thing, you can handle that too. So it's still applicable. But yeah, I definitely, try my best to be a little transparent to normalize it. But again, I recognize it's definitely not to the magnitude of what a lot of you are struggling with. All right, it's 9 o'clock. Should we
Oh,
answer?
really?
No. Well, Aimee, time just flies when it's the two of us because we have so much fun, right?
Seriously, that's crazy. I thought it was like 8:30.
Really? All right, guys. I know there's a lot more questions. Do we have another one scheduled together? I don't think we do.
We do not. We have to line one up.
Okay. We'll have to let you guys know. I know I'm back, I think, with another one of our awesome therapists. I can't remember, maybe in like 2 weeks on a Tuesday.
And I'll check with Jenna and then we'll figure something out.
Yeah, but it was per usual so nice to hang out with you guys for a little bit. And yeah, of course you too, Aimee. And just try to answer some of your questions to the best of our ability. Again, if you feel like you're struggling with OCD or you want some answers, please visit treatmyocd.com. And you can set up a free phone call with the care team. They are great, and they can steer you in the right direction. Like I said, we're growing and we're getting so big. We're hiring so many therapists. So definitely reach out to us. And yeah, any final comments, Aimee, before we wrap up?
Thank you, as always, for coming on and helping me answer these questions. Sometimes I'm like, I don't even know what to say. I get so overwhelmed sometimes. So I hope I did okay. But usually that's an ERP for me because that's said just right. I have to answer everything perfect.
You know what? I'm going to let you sit with that uncertainty then.
There you go.
All right, everyone. We are out. I'll see you soon.
Bye, guys. Bye, Madina.